Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of the National Curriculum, the podcast that definitely doesn't leave after only 45 minutes. It's been another great week in Australian football, and we are here to break it all down. My name is your host, Joey Lynch, stealing Nick Dabano's look for the week. And I'll introduce him first as he does join us. Nick Dabano, how you doing, mate? What you been up to?
Good. Can't complain here. Busy weekends, the usual kind of stuff, but all good here. Can't complain, Joey. Just interesting to see that you have copied my look. That was the first thing I noticed jumping in this chat. I was thinking, what is going on there with that thing on your face? But now there's a certain intruder that's
I'm even
now
wearing black
seeing double here. For Matt Hummels.
We are also joined by the other Nick, who didn't bother to do an introduction for last week's podcast, hence why he is now kicked out of the hosting share. But Nick Stoll, how are you doing, mate?
Look, listeners, viewers, like, comment, subscribe, leave some reviews, and leave some reviews. Who's the better host, me or Joey? Because I get straight into it. Get straight into football. Bang, in. That's it. You don't have to waste time. You don't have to skip through the boring introductions like you do on every other podcast. You just get straight into it. You talk football. That's it. All right. 5 stars, and then say who you like, Joey or Nick. Boom.
This is a podcast. Our listeners are a family with us, Nick. We want to bring them in. We want to invite them into our conversations, invite them into our lives. We want to.
Look, if they're anything like my family, they want to get straight into the hot topics. All right. No, I don't need the small talk. Let's go. This is what's wrong with your family. Bang. Anyway, good start.
Excellent. We are also joined by the only clean-shaven member of the podcast tonight, Josh Parrish. Josh, how are you?
Yeah, it takes 10 years off me every time. I got stung by a jellyfish today, but apart from that, very good.
Did you pee on it?
Yeah.
Did you pee on it?
No, I did not. I went to the Surf Lifesavers and asked for an ice pack.
Josh, why did
me
you
and
need
the 5-year-old kid next to me.
Josh, why did you need to look 10 years younger?
Just so the Surf Lifesavers would help me. Just a quick shave.
Nick, that's the first in joke of the night. So hello to Pakua Frimpong as well.
Good Lord. And he's just been speaking
4-star reviews and then complain about the too many in jokes. That's fine.
So he just made the first of what will no doubt be many in jokes on the show tonight. Teo Pellizzeri, after calling a game today, Teo, have you had a moments to rest this weekend?
Yeah, and obviously very busy here on the runway at Kingsford Smith. Thank you to everyone in the comments who pointed out all the planes that go overhead on last week's pod. But yes, it's a pleasure to be back, and just a relief that we had a full weekend of A-League Women's and that the A-League Men's is hopefully starting to round the bend into a post-Omicron infection spate. But as we'll get into, the emails, even as recently as today, continue to come out with all the postponements and the fixture changes. So it's a pretty brutal time.
There you go. The destroyer of your timeline has spoken. So let's get into the football matches that took place over the weekend. And we are going to start in the city of churches, Adelaide, where it was Adelaide United 2, Melbourne City 2. Bit of a repeat, so to speak. Again, Melbourne City holding a lead late going into the contest, but again, the Reds come back and force the spoils to be shared at Cooper's Stadium or Hindmarsh Stadium if you are a traditionalist. And I mean, I'll throw this one to the floor. We saw Matt Leckie get 2 assists after he come under the spotlight in the week ahead. Patrick Isnorbo backing him in his pre-game press conference when I asked him about the form of Leckie, saying that he needed an adjustment period the same as any foreign signing coming to the A-League men competition. I think we need to keep in mind that Leckie is Australian, but his wife and children are German, so it's not like it's been a seamless transition for the Leckie household. But 2 assists against Adelaide. As I said, I'm throwing this open. Is Matt Leckie back? Is the Melbourne City front line, which has been christened by our vacant friend Ante Jukic as the ASS trio, are they going to start firing in the goals?
I think absent you were looking for, not vacant for Ante. But
He's pretty vacant, to quote one of my favourite songs.
Lecky had a touch of the Michael Jordans in the Last Dance doc. I think he took some of that criticism a little personally that he received over the past couple of weeks. I think the intensity was a bit higher. He was still doing the same things, but a little bit better. And especially in the lead up to the second goal, there was just a degree of athleticism to which he got to the ball first ahead of Adelaide's midfielders twice and just barraged his way through. So certainly improved performance, but the systemic issues in this Melbourne City front line continue with three players who are way too similar and do too many of the same things to be truly complementary. So I think it was more effort in trying to prove everybody wrong rather than a serious breakthrough tactically for City. And again, those who do not learn from history doomed to repeat it. Another 2-2 draw at Hindmarsh for City when they should have held on to the lead.
Well, you mentioned it there, Josh, the same thing, but better. Is that the best case scenario for Melbourne City, Nick DeBarno? The fact that Patrick Isnorbo has been pretty adamant in his declarations that we're not going to change it up. We're going to keep doing this. Is that the best that City fans can hope for? The same thing, just they'll start doing it better?
Well, there's a couple of things. So yes, first of all, an analogy to think about when you think about these two games. I don't know how many people listening or in this chat are almost Star Wars fans in this one, but it's like A New Hope and Force Awakens. It's like the same plot, except just some different characters, but exactly the same storyline, just 30 years or however long between movies, and had the same sort of outcome in the end. But in terms of what you were mentioning there, Joey, I think we've got to take a bit of context into this. We've got to remember where Melbourne City are in terms of, squad availability, the COVID situation. They had a lot of players out again yesterday, a lot of players coming back from COVID. We know the effects of long COVID can sort of change things. So I don't know. It's an interesting one because, again, I don't know if Marco Tilio's fit, if he potentially starts this game or has a greater impact against Western Sydney. He was very good off the bench, came on, scored straight away. I just wonder if maybe things are tinkered a little bit if he's available, how different things might be defensively if Curtis Good is around as well. It's an interesting one because I just am curious to see, do we give City a bit of leeway for a couple more games until, maybe some of these guys get up to a little bit more scratch, recovering from COVID, because we know everyone sort of reacts differently to it and their bodies can react differently. You do look at Curtis Good, for example. So I'll be sort of intrigued in the next week or so to see how City progress from here. But I don't know. It was a bit of a strange game, to be honest. As you did say, it literally just felt like the same thing. It felt like Groundhog Day again, 2-2 draw at Coopers. So yeah, that's all I got to say on that.
I have limited sympathy for Melbourne City. It's hard to judge with COVID. You don't know what players' fitness levels are like, and you can only really guess. But City have players on their bench that they've hoovered up from Adelaide who were previously starting for Adelaide and now barely see minutes. Taras Gamulka, for example, was starting for Adelaide not too long ago. Then he goes to City and he barely plays now. Stefan Kolikovsky would start for Adelaide. So I have very limited sympathy for Melbourne City, who have such great squad depth in situations like this. I think they should be doing better with what they have. And I just think they've got more players to plug into these positions in times of crisis than most teams in the competition. So they should be better placed to deal with COVID outbreaks.
I think it's remarkable watching Melbourne City in action. Sometimes I feel, especially when they're not able to get out in transition, so when they actually have to build up and play, I feel like Krusty the Clown watching the Washington Generals playing against the Harlem Globetrotters. That bit where he says, he's just spinning the ball on his finger. Take it. Like with City, I know they're going to go wide and look for the cutback. Just stop that. And I mean, that is, admittedly, they were well-worked goals. I mean, it's particularly the move from Connor Metcalfe on the first goal. But that's how both of their goals arrived in this game. Just get it out wide.
Stopping the cutback is very difficult. I mean, most Manchester City basically are going to win 4 Premier Leagues out of the last 5 off just cutting the ball back.
Let's
about 1,000
times.
I mean, De Bruyne's cutback last night.
Let's not go comparing, Connor Metcalfe to Kevin De Bruyne in here before we get a little bit out of hand. But I mean, I think, as the chat's resident fan of Tilio's Nick Stoll, how heartbroken were you to see that Tilio was DMP health and safety protocols?
So, I mean, devastated. I mean, you want to look at the reason that Melbourne City didn't win 8-2, the absence of Tilio. But I guess it's just the frustrating thing of like, and this is, I guess, a more wider question about the league, is that so many players are going to just be missing over the next month and have been, and that's why we've had so many postponements. And look, to be honest, it was just great to get a couple of games off, even though they were at the same time, which was slightly frustrating. But this season is ridiculous. This season, like, I can barely keep up with this season, not because so much is happening, because it is like being drip fed to us. It is like, what it's hard to work out. Is there a game on? Oh, is it FA Cup? Oh, there is no, oh, the game's off. Oh, it was on, but it's off. Oh, it's moved. Oh, no, now it's back on. It might be, no, like this. And look, I'm not blaming anyone. Like, it's obviously a global pandemic. There's not much you can do. But this is so hard to follow. This is so hard. The Jets, we always talk about how box office the Jets are. I don't know if they are anymore. They haven't played for like a month. All right. Perth Glory.
That's true. It'll be a month to the day if their game on Wednesday against Western goes ahead.
Yeah. So they haven't played for a month. So it's like, how am I meant to judge this? How, and even I don't know how, like, you know, Arthur Papas or any coach, how are they keeping momentum? Because so much of building a team, of a team gelling, is that week by week playing every week. And you can do things in training, but I'm assuming players are having to take 10 days out all the time. This to me as a season, and I feel huge sympathy for the clubs, for the players, for the organizers, for the broadcasters even. This season is just, it's no one's fault, but it is an absolute disaster. And it is so hard to judge players, like you said, Debano, about long COVID. I don't know. Players are coming back, and I don't know if they're coming back. Yeah, no problem. You know, it was nice to see, and we'll get on to Sydney FC in a minute, but it was nice to see Ryan Grant actually looked quite good yesterday for Sydney FC, which I was worried that, you know, a guy who's so those lung busting runs, COVID is obviously not the one thing you want. So I don't know. This disease is driving me nuts, as you may have been able to tell. And I just feel that this league, it's increasingly hard to kind of, I don't know if you put an asterisk next to this season, but Perth Glory, I think the last time they played was November or something like that, or December or something ridiculous. So I don't know what you guys' thoughts about that, just to completely railroad the conversation.
No, I think you raised a good point, but we are rounding towards that mark, which Danny Townsend said last week, which was, I believe, the 15th, where most teams should be clear. My understanding is that all bar 3 have basically had Omicron sweep through, which means there's still potentially some dominoes to fall. But I guess the more troubling dominoes are the ones like Perth, due to the border situation and some of the vexatious issues around the availability of teams to go to certain parts of the country. But if we can bring it back to talking about Adelaide versus Melbourne City, I had one more question on this, which is the resilience of teams when they get reduced to 10 men. Not having followed ardently Melbourne City's march to the title last season, I do apologise if there was some landmark moment with 10 men where they perhaps had a coming of age or proved a point. But on the evidence presented, is it safe to say that even though they're a top team with top players, are they a great down to 10 men sort of team with the way they responded? Because it did feel as though there was a sense of inevitability that Adelaide were coming back, rather than, say, Melbourne City taking the oxygen out of the game once the man advantage was established last night.
I think that's always been the question surrounding Melbourne City. Supposedly, the demons, the ghosts of the Harting at days were exercised during their premiership and championship winning season last year. But one, you know, was that perhaps a flash in the pan? To be honest, I don't think that they are quite as prone to the incredibly humorous collapses that they would have been in the past. But it is a very valid question, I think, because you would ostensibly think from a side with the talent that has been pointed out that they do have, and the mental toughness that they have supposedly had instilled within this group, that was supposedly one of the great legacies that Eric Mombert's left in this group, their supposed mental strength and toughness, that they would be able to close a game out like that when reduced to 10 men, or in fact, as I think Josh might be about to get to, not even go down to 10 men in the first place, given how silly that dismissal was.
Yeah, my point wasn't so much on the dismissal. It was that without Nuno Reis, this is a different team. He is a stabilizing factor for them. If you think back to their title-winning campaign and the first sort of 4 or 5 games of that season before Reis came in, there were questions about Kisnorbo's job. It was, how long does Paddy have left before he gets it in the neck? And then they signed Nuno Reis, and he started playing consistent football at the back for them, and suddenly they seemed stable and had a base to build from. So he's sort of a barometer for this team, not quite to the same extent that Schenkerveld was, because that whole side was kind of built on sand. And, when you didn't have Bart Schenkerveld back there, it was a complete disaster. But I don't think this side can defend particularly well when Nuno Reis isn't there. They've deputised with Griffiths there quite ably when Curtis Good's been unavailable. But without Nuno Reis, they went to pieces after the red card.
Just quickly on Good, it's low-key quite it's not disappointing, because I'm not disappointed in Good, but it's a dispiriting development, Curtis Good's continuous absence from this squad. Kisnorbo saying again midweek that he's been out of isolation for I think about a fortnight now, but he's still battling and trying to recover from his bout of COVID. I mean, we don't know whether it's long COVID or whether it just hit him harder and he needs longer to recover. But I think it's a real shame for Curtis, because if there's one thing that you could say potentially has defined the career of Curtis Good, it's been injuries and ailments at the absolute worst possible time. And I genuinely think, as a left-footed centre-back that shaped as someone that was going to be playing week in and week out, he probably would have been selected in the Socceroo squad for the coming World Cup qualifiers had he not developed COVID. I know, we can debate the merits of Curtis Good in the Socceroos, but I think he would have been picked. And just on a personal level, I think it's a really disappointing blow for one of the A-League's good people. So, yeah, that was a bit of non sequitur, but yeah, back to the game.
Well, yeah, I have a question about the game, which I just want to know, anyone who was at the game, I know none of us were there, but I just would love to know if you were there in Hindmarsh or Cooper Stadium, sitting there in Adelaide. And if you happened to see Isaias, who was obviously suspended after his red card last week, was he shouting at his team? Was he cheering them on? Was he saying vamos, or was he saying fuck off? And that's really, I think, the question that I want answered. So please let us know. I know we don't have a lot of listeners in Adelaide, according to the statistics, but maybe you can help us out there.
Maybe we should ask your former co-host, Nick Stoll, for engagement tips for Adelaide.
Yeah, well, we know how to get their talk radio talking. Don't worry.
So does anyone else have a point on the game? Because I have a question about a player Joey just mentioned.
Go on,
No? So Bart Schenkerveld's contract at Panathinaikos expires in 2023, at which point
I think you mean to...
At which point he'll be 32. He's been out for 3 months with an ankle injury and has barely played this season due to getting minutes back in his legs and coming back. Is it a foregone conclusion that he will be lured back to Australia? Is there any evidence that he enjoyed his time here? Or is he too good a player? Is he too good a player to come here because he'll still make too much money in Europe after his one little sojourn on holiday here?
I don't know if it's a foregone conclusion, but I think City should definitely put a feeler out. I mean, if, Bart Schenkerveld's available and you can get him out for a season or two, I think that it's definitely something to look at. We know that City's centre-back depth and, looking at it from now with Nuno Reis and Curtis Good to miss, it's not necessarily very deep. And Roston Griffiths is not a natural centre-back. The jury's still out on Karen Stokes and Jordan Hall. So I wouldn't be surprised if maybe they look at it. But then again, though, if I'm not too sure, Tara, I don't know if you have it in front of you, prior to the injury, whether he was playing a lot at Panathinaikos. But
yeah, he was. He was a first-team regular. So
yeah. So would you think that maybe a Eredivisie side maybe looks to bring him back to Holland? Does he look to potentially play somewhere else in Europe, maybe for an extra year, or stay in Greece?
Well, to me, my perception is these above-average players who come out here and are clearly a cut above, they tend to stay because they love the lifestyle, whether it's Berisha or Broish or others that have stayed for multi-years. Schenkerveld, I don't know if he's unique, but he's definitely different in the sense that he came here for 1 year, was a cut above, and then he left, and he's probably making considerably better money than he would be if he was still in the A-League and if he'd stayed. So I guess that, it's a shame that he wasn't one of those ones that was so lured by the lifestyle that he chose to stay.
I think Bart goes where he gets the most money. I mean, there were reports when he was initially leaving Melbourne City that he was demanding marquee wages and super high wages that City weren't going to meet. So I think he probably goes where he can get the most money, and I imagine that would be somewhere, be it in Greece, be it in the Netherlands, be it somewhere else in Europe, maybe even the Middle East. He'd probably dominate in the Middle East. I imagine he probably goes where the most money is, which I cannot begrudge him. This is his job. He's in his 30s. He's trying to set up himself and his family for the rest of his life. Go and secure the bag, my son.
I don't think it's the position of greatest need for City either. I think this is a short-term issue with Good being out and Nuno Resch getting a red card. I don't think their problems lie at centre half. I think they're in midfield, lack of creativity in midfield and movement off the ball, and a forward line that's a bit fundamentally incompatible, and Tilio not being able to get a look in. That's the problem with City at the moment, not their centre backs. So I don't think it's an appropriate use of resources if he is demanding that kind of coin. Another A-League team going in for him, though, I'd be very much in favour of.
To answer the creativity thing, Josh, I think it's about time. I know that he hasn't seen much football. I know it's really peddling my Italian propaganda, but there's a certain player there. They signed a foreigner who's barely seen a minute by the name of Manuel Pucciarelli. When I know he missed, and if you read between the lines, potentially he was one of the guys who are in the protocols. But when are we going to finally see him potentially get an opportunity and actually play in the A-League? We've seen him play consistently in the FFA Cup, but they've got to give him a crack at least, whether it's half an hour off the bench. We haven't even seen a cameo yet off the bench in the A-Leagues yet. So I think they've got to try it. I think he could offer something different. I remember him from back in his time in Serie A. I know it's a long time ago now, but we've actually got to see if the guy can play down here. And you're not going to know if he's just going to sit on the bench every week. So maybe he's an answer. I don't know, but I'd like to see him at least be given a crack.
Nick, are you saying that every time Manuel Pucciarelli is not on the field, everyone should be asking, where's Pucci?
Absolutely.
It's anti-Italian discrimination. That's what it is.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right.
Well, I mean, if we're talking about players at Melbourne City that we'd like to see play more, I think I've nailed my colours quite to the mast about who I'd like to be saying more. A certain Macedonian youth international.
Those colours are red and gold, Joe.
Yeah, that's the master. But I would also say on the subject of Bart, I mean, what a shame it is that the greatest centre-back in Melbourne City, and indeed A-League men history, is not a free agent and is still under contract in Korea for another year. But moving on, I'll let people that are fully aware of my brand figure out who I'm talking about there. But moving on, there was another A-League men game played across the weekend. In fact, it was played as a simultaneous kickoff with the City Adelaide game. It took place in Sydney. It was Sydney FC 1, Brisbane Roar 1. Another not the best performance from the Sky Blues. Brisbane not exactly flying this season, but taking a point off them. What is going on with Steve Corica's side? And I will throw that one to the floor.
Well, look, as the person, Taya's also based in Sydney, so we're strongly taking over. The Sydney Mafia is going to take over the TNC.
This is navy blue, and I'm wearing the same colour that the Sydney. Did the Sydney men wear the same kit as the Sydney women? The weirdly purple. Yeah.
Yes.
Sorry, I'll let you make a football-related point before I talk.
I like this.
No, it's almost like a role reversal. Here I am trying to derail the discussion, and you're making a serious football point. So I'm going to show you some respect, and I'm going to back off here and let you go first.
Here's why you should always make the sartorial point first, is because it's the first thing you notice. All right. You only get one chance to make a first impression. You see it. The first thing when you turn on the TV or the stream or however you're interacting or you're going to the game, as I think only 4,000 people did yesterday, but we might get into that in a minute. But the first thing you notice is the kit. And I actually liked the kit, but I know a few people were saying it didn't look too Sydney FC, but it didn't bother me. I don't know if anyone was for it or against it in any strong way.
I'm against it because I do think it's when they don't have a home stadium. Once you take home stadium out of the equation, you need differentiators, and that's when club colours become really important. And sorry to make an AFL point, but due to stadium homogenisation and all the Victorian teams playing out of either MCG or Docklands.
Marvel.
Docklands.
As an ESPN employee, I have to insist that you call it Marvel.
Right, okay. The issue is that people have become far more parochial and territorial about their colours because the idea of where home is doesn't exist in that sport anymore. And given that Sydney FC are currently a homeless team waiting for their new stadium to be built, I do think the colours are really central to the identity.
Yep, I think that's a good
Personally, I
shout.
think they should wear the prison bars.
You got in before me, Josh. You got in before me.
Good.
All right, back on the pitch. What I want to know is why Corica seems so hesitant to start Ninkovic and Burgess at the same time. And often when he goes to his substitutions, like he did yesterday, he swaps them for each other. Now, that's I mean, he would have his reasons for that. I just think that one of the reasons that they are struggling to create, as well as the absence of Adam Lafondra, who I think gave them a focal point up front, who they're badly missing. You could also suggest that Luke Braddon in midfield is a big out. He was important for progressing the ball forward. But I do wonder, I would say that one of the reasons that they are struggling to create as many chances as they have done in previous season is the fact last season they had a lot of Baumjohann and Ninkovic. And look, Baumjohann has his qualities and his faults as well, but at least they had 2 points of creativity. I think if you're relying a lot on an aging, Ninkovic who is not looking as sharp as he has in previous seasons, and then you're only substituting Burgess in, who is taking a while to acclimatize to this team, I think that they should be starting both of them. And Corica seems to think that that's not going to work for them. So I don't know if anyone else thinks that doesn't work.
Stoll, if you're not aware, I know a lot of people have been wondering how Sydney FC continually circumvent the salary cap. And the way they've done it here is Ninkovic and Max Burgess are actually on the same contract. It's a job share arrangement, so they can't be on the field at the same time. There's a breach of the salary cap of reason why. So Corica's hands are tied.
Oh, man, you know what? Well, this is one thing. If Sydney FC were breaching the salary cap in previous years, they need to get back doing it because that's what got them success. And up front,
this is football heritage.
Yeah, that's right. That's your culture. No, but on a serious point, Trent Bahaja up front. Trent Bahaja just seems like one of those players he's been a prospect for so long, right? Oh, he's a prospect. Oh, he's got a lot of speed. Oh, that's exciting. If he can just get that speed and add in that, it's always whenever a fast player comes in, there's always like, well, he's fast, and if he can just become that composed player, I don't see it happening. Although people did say that about Elvis Campsova, and last night he proved it with a very nice run. The thing that was more impressive than the run, in my opinion, was the little pass he played in for Caceres, which I thought was fantastic. And I think Josh, you're probably going to make this point, but he didn't really do much afterwards.
I was just going to say on Bahaja, one of the first times I remember watching him, there was a moment where he ran so fast, he went over the byline and then flipped over an advertising hoarding. And that sort of sums up Trent Bahaja's A-League career. But Elvis, I mean, the talk of the town, Joey.
Yes. I certainly kicked up a whole bunch of Victory fans on Twitter last night when I said that perhaps they needed to apologise to Elvis after his little run and assist there. Perhaps me deliberately taking a little bit of joy in refusing to provide any more context in the original tweet that I maybe perhaps should have done. I think Elvis Campsova, listen, I don't think it was working for him at Melbourne Victory, and I had no problems with either of the parties moving on from each other. I think they needed a break. What I did take issue with in terms of Elvis Campsova last season was that I felt he became too great of a lightning rod for Victory fans' frustrations and anger with the state that their club was in, compared to how much fault he was actually at for that.
I feel like Robbie Cruz with that.
Well, even with Robbie Cruz is a bloke that spent years and years playing in the Bundesliga, playing for the Socceroos, widely
was on
respected for his skill, was on big wages. Elvis Campsova was a bloke plucked from the NPL on very, very small, if not minimum wages, with the intention of being a supplementary piece, and was thrown into the mixture, basically given an outsized role because of the dysfunction and just downright bad way that Victory were run over the past 2 years. Now, did he play particularly well? No, not really. And I mean, maybe he had a few flashes. I mean, he did end up as their Golden Boot winner last season. But no,
But
he
that
didn't play
team was
particularly
just
well.
terrible.
Yeah, but that
like,
team was
who
shit.
played well? Who played
Exactly.
well? Like,
But yeah, my thing was that at times it sort of felt like outside of Anthony DiPietro and Trent Jacobs, it felt like Elvis Camsoba was the most reviled figure at times amongst the Victory fan group, maybe surpassed by Robbie Cruz as well. And I thought that was unfair that this minimum wage NPL signing, who shouldn't have been anywhere close to the role, who shouldn't have been given anywhere close to the amount of responsibility that he had, was the subject of such intense criticism. I think it lacked context. I think people should have been more angry with the circumstances that led to Elvis being put in the positions that he was than Elvis himself. Like,
So
if Victory went out and signed me tomorrow and put me up front, and I stunk up the place, as I no doubt would people be angry with me, or would people be angry with Tony Popovich for signing me and playing me up front?
Well, so my question to follow on from that, Joey, is why is it that Elvis is the first player in history who's not allowed to improve his circumstances by being better at a different club, in a different city, in a different situation, with a different coach and different teammates? Why is he not allowed to be the first player in history that can improve as a result of that? I mean, a Victory fan's going to be melting down even more when Kenny Athieu comes back from Southeast Asia, gets another A-League stint, and starts scoring goals. Are they going to take it personally when that happens in the future? I find it so bizarre. I realise it's the Melbourne-Sydney rivalry, and it's very much Sydney putting one over Victory by taking a player who was a whipping boy and turning him into a functional A-League player. Great, they can be angry about that. But again, the anger's misdirected. It's almost like Elvis left with debt owing, and the Victory fans are debt collectors that are chasing Elvis for performances that he didn't give them when he was there. And I think you've hit on the reason why it is. It's because there's a huge percentage of Victory fans that see every NPL and the existence of NPL as the biggest rival of their club, along with Adelaide and Sydney. And it's because of all the agitation and all of the Twitter people and all of the trolling in Facebook comments and what have you from NPL since day one of Melbourne Victory, since day one of the A-League. It's a club that to a percentage of its fans, football outside of the A-League in Australia is a rival of Melbourne Victory. And therefore, Elvis signed from a rival because he went through South Australian NPL, Melbourne Knights, and then Avondale before getting to Victory. And then he left to go to a different rival in Sydney FC. So I think that there is also that element to it, that if you come from the NPL and you're no good, it continues to perpetuate the idea that the A-League should be a closed shop forever, that NPL isn't worth going to or watching and should be the subject of ridicule, and that a national second division is something that should be derided and talked down to never take place. All positions that I very much disagree with, by the way, because I want to grow the game as big as possible. But that's my point on Elvis. I think he, again, Joey, is just a lightning rod, as you say, for a lot of those different factors. But that's my 2 cents on why he has become this player this season. And hey, I'm just happy for him.
Yeah. So yeah, basically, yeah. And to summarise my points, don't argue that he didn't perform well. I would argue that he should never have been in the positions to perform the way that he did, and that the massive amount of vitriol directed his way was disproportionate and completely lacking in context. But Nick DeBarno, after me and Teo have hijacked the pod to make an enemy of the entire Melbourne Victory fan base.
I said twice. A percentage.
Okay, fans grateful. Teo
And don't forget, most
yeah.
people who listen to my commentary think I'm a biased Victory flog anyway. So
I have no idea who people think I'm biased for. I mean, it changes all the time. But Nick,
let DeBarno speak, for God's sakes.
I just wanted to, before I move on to the game, just quickly about Elvis. Can I just play devil's advocate here and just say that, like, if you really look at his 3 seasons at Melbourne Victory, was he really the worst player? Was he really that bad? Like, I know he missed a lot of chances, but his first few months, he was pretty good. And last season, like towards the end of last season, when Victory were playing for nothing under Steve Keane, he had some all right performances. I remember a few where you're like, geez, Elvis, like, where was that for so long? And he showed a lot of glimpses. And you're right, Teo, maybe maybe who would have thought the amazing concept of a player thriving in a different environment might be the best for him to get out of a situation where your fans are, or a percentage of your fans are literally, when you come on, it's like a massive groan around the stadium. You're the perpetual whipping boy of everything that goes wrong. That maybe going to Sydney FC was just the best thing for his career. It's just like leaving a toxic workplace. Like, of course, you're going to thrive somewhere where they actually believe in you and your fans are riding every bump and not actually actively shitting on you at every single opportunity. So, anyways, that's just
at what point, Stoll might be the better barometer of this. At what point do the Sydney FC fans celebrate Elvis for who he is rather than celebrate him for the fact that he's playing well for Sydney and better than he ever did for Victory? Or is it always going to be that perpetuating state of amping up the rivalry because, hey, your ex is happy with me, you know?
Yeah, it's football. You have to, if you can get joy and humiliate the opposition at the same time, your rivals, that's what you have to do. Absolutely. One thing I see is people keep asking, oh, why was he kind of hated so much? It's because he's this type of player. All right. This type of player, a very fast player who gets the ball on counterattacks. Whenever a fan sees a counterattack, they kind of see the goal forming in their head already. And they go, okay, we've got a fast break here. It's a 3-on-2, it's a 2-on-3, whatever it is. I think we can do it here. Or maybe it's 1-on-1 with the keeper. Vinicius is a classic example of this player. Vinicius Real Madrid. Everyone was whistling Vinicius. He was a typical young player, come from Brazil, 18, 19. He could not score to save himself. Now he's maybe the best player in La Liga after Benzema. And, another one is Dama Traore is another one at Wolves. Typical, he's not as good as Vinicius, no way. But that fast player who gets on the break, who causes frustration because he gets in good positions, because he causes a lot of, chances with his speed, but that doesn't capitalize on them. And I just say another thing, it's very difficult to be a young, inexperienced attacker in a team that doesn't create a lot of chances. That's, I think, a very difficult thing. Sydney FC do create more chances than they were previously doing at Melbourne Victory, which means that he's going to flourish more.
I think the way that people watch football is very outcome dependent, and people get annoyed more with frustrating players than they do with completely ineffectual ones.
Yeah.
So Cam Sober getting into those good positions all the time and then making the wrong decision or fluffing the finish or the final pass is actually more antagonizing to a fan who's riding every kick of the game than somebody who's hiding and not even getting the ball in those positions. So that's why Robbie Cruz is a whipping boy. That's why Cam Sober is a whipping boy. And I'm glad to see him playing well. I think it became a mental block for him at Victory with all the fans on his back. He got the yips in front of goal. And it didn't help when, there's Instagram stories going around of him at Love Machine, at 3 a.m. the day of a game or whatever that he knew he wasn't going to get picked for. So,
hey, look, Maradona was doing 3-day coke binges at Napoli, all right?
But it doesn't help your reputation.
Elvis Cam, let's not.
Elvis Camsover compared to
Maradona.
Vinicius and Maradona. We're off on a fly.
After we've compared Conor Metcalf to Kevin De Bruyne earlier.
You know what? Here's a story for you. Someone once in Australian football media once told me that they could compete with Maradona for partying fitness, basically. They reckon they could go toe-to-toe, line for line with Maradona, and I was like, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. So, respect Maradona.
Was line for line. Yeah, line for line. Yeah.
Line for line was exactly what I was meant.
Yeah. Okay. I want to quickly just pause before we get back to Sydney FC. Nick, are you wearing a Footscray Just t-shirt?
No, I am wearing a Barcelona t-shirt.
That looks a lot like a Footscray Just t-shirt.
No, if it was my shade of blue with that logo, then it absolutely would be.
I have a Footscray Just t-shirts. I really enjoy it. Shout out Anthony Siokas, who sent me this t-shirt and all those other t-shirts. And shout out Football Cult. Go get your t-shirts from them. Can I make one final point?
Then Nick's going to start getting a whole bunch of free t-shirts for the next 6 weeks.
One final point on the game. Great to see Mustafa Amini get some minutes. I think he can add a lot to that team. I am excited to see how that goes. And I really enjoyed that game because I live in Australia.
Oh, you bastard. You've completely thrown. No. Okay. Final one from me. I do have, Josh, you watched the game. We actually.
You live in Australia. Did you enjoy it?
I enjoyed it. I was singing the national anthem throughout.
Oh God, just we teased this at the start of this conversation, so I should probably ask you the question. Sydney FC, it's another draw. Why aren't we've touched on it in previous pods? Do we have any more information about why the killbots aren't the killbots?
I think it's partially due to a lack of faith in his creative players and Steve Corica being fundamentally very rigid in his thinking and very conservative in his decision making. Partially it was due to just not finishing their chances in the second half because they had a bunch of them and got very, very close. They hit the post. They were very close to finishing this game off. But, mostly I think it's because they have a midfield pairing that is composed of athletes and, that doesn't really get on the ball and receive those, I guess Mourinho would call them first station passes, the ultimate sin, passing from a centre-back to a central midfielder. They don't really make themselves available too much if they're under pressure in that situation. Like Yazbek has a great work rate and so does Retre, but I just don't see them as a functional midfield pairing. I think they really do miss the influence of Luke Bratton. But also, where's Callum Neuvenhoff? Like, where is he gone?
He's
Okay,
injured.
well, that
Injured,
sucks because
yeah.
even when he was fit, he wasn't given the chance. And I
Josh,
think
he's
that's
injured. I've just heard that he's injured.
This just in breaking news. But yeah, look, I don't know if they have a player without Neuvenhoff being available. They have a player to replace what Bratton does. And the other thing is, I think other teams are just working them out. They're predictable in their approach. It's pretty cookie cutter. So I would like to see just once maybe a different formation from Sydney or a different game plan. Not just the same shape and the same players just interchange in the same positions. Like maybe play a midfield 3 one of these days or go to a back 3. Just mix it up a little bit. Create a little bit of unpredictability in your tactical approach week to week. Otherwise, you're too easy to game plan for.
I'd say Lafondra as well. Lafondra is a massive out. That dude just scored goals for fun in the A-League. And, he was a typical player who Sydney FC wouldn't play well. Goal 1-0, Adam Lafondra. The amount of times that happens.
Sausage roll.
And a finisher like that turns a mediocre attack, a fundamentally mediocre team, into a title-winning team.
Totally.
There we go. Well, we have exhausted our conversations on the 2 A-League men games of the past
42
weekend.
minutes.
Fingers crossed for Wednesday.
Fingers crossed.
Can we mention the fixture change that came through? Because it's now going to be Brisbane versus Perth. And this is the first time we'll see Perth in months and months and months. So hopefully the 2 games that are currently scheduled for Wednesday go through and we will get next weekend rolled out. I mean, ideally tomorrow, maybe by Tuesday, but it's a moving feast at the moment. It really is.
Well, I mean,
Joey Sturridge is fit.
Can I say one last thing on this game is that more so than the Melbourne City Adelaide match, you really felt the impact of COVID and these teams not quite being up to match fitness in this game. The players were just dropping like flies in the last 5 or 10 minutes. It looked like they were crawling over the finish line. Brisbane had to finish with 10 players because Ivanovic, who came off the bench, got injured and then had to come off and they'd used all their substitutes. So it was really a slog like the last 10 minutes of the game for both teams. So I wonder where they're going to be at going into the next few games whenever they might be played.
Just on that, for you Southerners, humid as AF yesterday. Oh, it was brutal. So the conditions didn't help.
Yeah, one reason to actually have a drinks break in the middle of the half,
Yeah, definitely.
All right, there we go. So as we approach the 45-minute mark of this podcast, don't worry, we're not leaving early. It's time for some A-League women talk. And remarkably, pretty much, I think it was, in fact, a full slate of games played this weekend. Omicron who, in fact. Well, I guess a lot of action.
Can I give a theory? Can I give a theory on this? And it is a harebrained theory. Is the reason that fewer players in the women's are testing positive because due to being semi-professional or potentially complete amateurs, I mean, they all get paid, so they're all semi-professional. But due to having to juggle study, high school, and or work, the players are far better at the concept of sacrifice and the concept of compartmentalizing. And the idea of sacrificing social opportunities because of football, the idea of compartmentalizing their life to work and then to go to training, because football isn't their sole focus, is their only full-time job, they're actually better equipped to deal with something like that? Or is that the expanding brain meme as I continue?
No, that's a good theory.
It's a good
I heard they did get a lot of ivermectin, and that's just sorted them all out. I'm hoping that's going to lift this podcast to a different level. Rogan, give me a call.
Oh,
Come
no.
on.
Oh,
Chat.
no.
It'll be all
I'm
good.
going to point out for the record before we move on that Nick Stoll is joking. Do not take ivermectin for COVID. Not safe, not studied. Talk to your doctor. Get vaccinated.
Yeah.
Oh,
This point was actually
Christ.
good.
We already
Fun
have.
fact, a friend of
We
mine
already
is-
have. We already have one Australian football journalist that actually legitimately believes what you just said, Nick. We don't need another one joking about it.
Really, I don't even know who that one is. So fun times.
Fun fact, a friend of mine is in a very rural part of the world at the moment and got a parasite, and she can't get ivermectin, which is the treatment for it, because everybody's taking it for COVID instead. There's a global shortage. So don't.
Yes.
Anyway, look, enough on COVID, because now we can move on to the stuff on the field. But that was just like, it is a credit to the teams and the players that they're juggling this with such aplomb, especially given that both Perth and Wellington are living away from home. So
just bloody Stoll complains about in-jokes and then drops a fucking ivermectin joke right into the middle of the podcast. But okay.
Not an in-joke. Everyone knows it.
A-League women's games. So a lot of narrow results. We had 2 1-0s. We had a 3-2. The game just completed. We had a 1-1. And then in the other game, Canberra United and Sydney FC, to quote the Italian job, blew their bloody doors off. Teo, what happened in that game? Is Sydney really good? Is Canberra really bad? Is it both? Can anybody stop the Sky Blues this season?
Sydney's got the deepest team. So Remy Simpson and Courtney Vine went to play for the Matildas, and Curte Rojas came in and scored a hat-trick. Paige Satchell, and I will say Paige Satchell, who is 23 years old, mid-career New Zealand international, started in the starting 11, and Princess Abini scored for the first time since round 1. They're just a team that bats incredibly deep. Their backline had been challenged, and yet they had recent Matilda call-up Jessica Nash on the bench and came on for a 5-minute cameo at the end. It's just a masterclass in squad construction, but also in convincing players that their development is best served by getting 5 minutes off the bench rather than going, say, up the freeway to Newcastle or down the Federal Highway to Canberra, where they would play every week. And I think there's potentially some merit to it. Canberra have a lot of players that would be better in a good team. I would say 7 or 8 of Canberra's starting 11 yesterday could seamlessly hold their own in Sydney's starting 11 as like-for-like swaps. But then the player they swap with that goes to Canberra would struggle. And I'm really trying to work out if it's a product of the culture of the club or if it's a product of their recruiting. And the example I like to use is Charlotte McLean, who had to wait until she was 20 to get a go in the A-League Women's. And as we know, this is a competition where most players debut as teenagers, many of them as 16 or 17-year-olds. This is someone who had to wait until she was 20. So every other team in the country has had 4 years of being able to consider her play. And then she comes into Sydney FC and has been an above-average player, playing at centre-back every week, a position where Australians generally struggle and we genuinely do not produce many players. And here she is on a streak of 6 consecutive clean sheets. Now, is that because the ship of Theseus replaced a different plank with Charlotte McLean? Or is that because Charlotte McLean is a really good recruit and everyone else fell asleep on her and Sydney just had the best recruiting? I can't tell. It's a really tough one. But I think the other example is Cote Rojas had scored 2 goals in 24 games across Adelaide and Sydney before the weekend. Across Adelaide and Canberra. And now she's played a couple of sub-appearances and 1 full game for Sydney and she scores a hat-trick. So it's really hard to tell. As for Canberra, and Joey, I'll throw this to you for your thoughts. This is a team that won the Premier's Plate in 2017, lost that very contentious home semi-final to Melbourne City on the Sunday night at Bruce Stadium. And then they have won 18 of their next 55 games. So it's not like this is a bad year. It's almost like last season was a bit of a false dawn in what is now a 5-year stretch of them not being the benchmark that they once were.
Well, I think, and I should also point out now that I'm going to be a much better host now because the main character of Soccer Twitter tonight has deleted the tweet that made them the main character of Soccer Twitter tonight, so I can focus entirely on the podcast now. And I think, but on Canberra, I know you and me were discussing it a bit in the lead up to this podcast, Teo. There is a discussion surrounding the model of Canberra United and whether it remains fit for purpose in the modern A-League women's competition. Canberra United, of course, heavily capital football involved in the running of that program versus the likes now of Sydney FC, Melbourne City, Melbourne Victory that are heavily investing in their programs, trying to run them sort of not quite to the same level as an A-League men program. We'd love it if they were, but on that road, so to speak. And Teo, I'll throw to you because you...
Is the factor that when the A-League women started, because some of the teams were run by state federations, so very much on a budget, Victory, a classic example, they were run by FFV until 2015. But was it also that other than Sydney FC, the big city teams they weren't the sort of the best training conditions, they weren't the sole focus like Canberra was because
they didn't care.
Team.
The other teams didn't care.
The other teams didn't care, but then the chance to get that same level of care in a more desirable city like Melbourne. So City does that and then drags Victory with them. So all of a sudden you have two very desirable teams to play for. Sydney FC has always been a desirable team to play for, but now Wanderers are as well. Is this purely a comparison of Melbourne, Sydney and Canberra, or Melbourne, Sydney and Adelaide? And whatever unique selling point Canberra may have had has basically been eliminated, and the only way they can re-find a unique selling point is to over-invest to the same level that they were ahead of the curve between, say, 2009 and 2014, which I would suggest is no longer possible.
It cannot be done because, as you said, federation run, they do not have the pockets to compete with the likes of a Melbourne Victory or a Sydney FC or a Melbourne City anymore. It might take an entirely new... I mean, we have seen that you can potentially find underappreciated gold in them that are hills. I think maybe the best example is this year's Perth Glory side with Alex Aparkis, how he's basically plundered the New South Wales NPL and NPL Victoria competitions for these unheralded prospects such as your Yanchevskis and your Sakalises, and he's turning them and he's using them regularly in that Perth Glory side, which got a 1-1 draw today. Do you become the island of misfit toys where you get the most out of the unheralded players and become a refuge for those that can't get a look in anywhere else for whatever reason? I don't know. It's potentially one of the biggest issues facing Canberra United. I mean, this will win me absolutely no fans with Canberra United's faithful and no doubt a number of other people, and I'm not advocating it, but as a hypothetical, when Canberra does eventually get an A-League men team, do you merge with them and begin to utilise a model more similar to these other women's sides that are raising the bar, and perhaps as part of that merger, are you able to extract concessions from the men's side to guarantee a minimum level of investment to ensure that you don't get left behind?
Would it be unreasonable to say that the days of only A-League men's licenses being granted are over? And
1,000%.
And that Western and Macarthur and Central Coast not having A-League women's teams is merely a legacy of the FFA running the competition, and it won't be acceptable into the future. I mean, I know that Joey and I are dominating this discussion. Does anyone want to jump in on that point?
You're muted still.
Well, that's didn't want to interrupt such an interesting conversation, but I just wanted to say that was the whole rebrand, right? That was the whole look. These leagues are equal. That's why they're called A-League Men's, A-League Women's. We're gonna market them equally and all that. So yeah, of course you can't. No club can be introduced into the league without a women's club, which is also something that the second division, obviously should be mindful of as well when putting that all together. They need to have women's teams as well, because if they're going to come up to the A-League, but they should have them anyway, but if they're going to come up to the A-League, they'll need to have them.
Yeah, I think we can move on from the game itself. I still think Canberra will beat Wellington. So I suspect that they'll finish second last this year. The gap is starting to open up. That unless they pull off some big upsets somewhere, they're already starting to lose ground on every team outside of the bottom two.
Well, moving on to other teams in the finals race. Melbourne Victory today. 1-0 win over Western Sydney Wanderers. Maya Sue Markowski with the penalty to win the game for Melbourne Victory. They get their first 3 points after a 2-game losing streak. They keep their first clean sheet since the ACL injury to Kayla Morrison. And I think their first clean sheet sans Kayla Morrison since, what would it be, the 2018-19 season? Did they keep a clean sheet the season before Morrison signed? It's been a while.
They have, but it's been at least a season. Yeah. So the game itself was very much played to the conditions. It was warm. Both teams were very conservative in the first half. They both tried to win, to be fair, and Victory didn't really lock down on their 1-0 lead until the last 5 minutes. I have a bit of a vexatious question though. Last season, or 2 seasons ago in the AFL, there was a campaign for Jack Nunes with his set shot goal after the siren to win goal of the year, and the philosophical debate of, can a set shot win goal of the year? My question is, can a penalty kick...
I'm cutting you off. No.
Can a penalty kick not win goal of the year, but can it at least win goal of the round? Because Maya Markowski's penalty kick was under pressure in a game of few chances, was as good a penalty as you will see, and it was hit with the confidence. You remember Michael Owen in the 1998 World Cup in the penalty shootout against Argentina, where he's just scored one of the greatest goals of all time during the game. His confidence is 11 out of 10, and he goes and just pings the top corner with his penalty kick in the highest pressure situation you can imagine. Maya Markowski's penalty was the A-League women's equivalent of that. It was incredible.
I agree.
Hold on, I'm
penalties are
keeping track.
underappreciated.
No, I'm keeping track. So Elvis Kamsober as Maradona, Connor Metcalf as Kevin De Bruyne, and now Maya Markowski as Michael Owen.
Well, she's a lot taller than Michael Owen, so she's got that going.
Has she ever schooled a 13-year-old goalkeeper?
When she was 13.
Junior player, yeah.
Just quickly, that reminds me, this is very, very niche small Oz football areas. But do you guys remember when they used to do the ICC down here, and it was Man City? I think they played Roma down here. It was a penalty shootout, and Joe Hart went and took that penalty. It was exactly the same thing, supreme confidence, and put it like top bins. That literally, whenever I think of confident penalties like Maya's was today, that's always the first thing that comes to mind, because it takes a lot of guts to put the ball, or at least try and put the ball in the top corner, because how many times have we seen it not come off and it flies either over the bar or into the crossbar, like a certain other, if we're talking about bad penalties, Joey, and bad penalty shootout moments in our sort of history. Obviously, I'm younger. A certain Roberto Baggio did as well in 1994. But on that note, Teo, I must say, kudos to the commentary. I think that's why it should be goal of the round as well.
On a serious point, because speaking of Amy Chapman and I mentioned this in the commentary after the penalty kick. The reason the Matildas are not the champions of Asia right now is because we didn't know who our penalty taker was in the final of 2018. And Elise Kellon-Knight, with one international goal to her name at the time from 90-something caps, stepped up to take that penalty because a recognised penalty taker wasn't on the field, and she was the most confident one, but it still got saved. And so we're heading in. I mean, we've been knocked out of the 2019 World Cup on penalties. We've been knocked out of the 2016 Olympics on penalties. It is actually a major problem and is a source of us being either eliminated or losing the tournaments that we go to in women's football. So to have good penalty takers, even if Maya Markowski doesn't go on to play for the Matildas one day, is it not a great example that's been set here of how penalties should be taken?
Bolter.
No. Today
I thought that was where that was going.
No. Today was our first start, Josh. Even I'm not so bold as to throw that out there.
Perhaps it could be a case of capping her before Macedonia can.
We're in a tug of war for quite a few at the moment because we've got Alani Elchevsky and Emma Ilioski as well, Joey. So please don't alert them to the fact that we're a potential breeding ground for the Macedonian national team.
One thing I'll say about penalties in general is penalties are a form of communication. All right. There are some penalties that you basically, like the Joe Hart penalty that you talked about, Nick, was just, it's an F off penalty. You're telling everyone who's ever doubted you, your coaches, your other teammates, your opposition, F off, bang, top right corner, right? Then you've got your Panenka, especially like your Pirlo Panenka. That's a different type of like F off. It's more F off in like, how dare you disturb me? How dare, which ironically was against Joe Hart. But that's a penalty that says like, I am so much superior to you. It's embarrassing that you stand before me, which I do like as a form of communication. Every penalty says something. There's a statement within it, and that statement there from that penalty, I think, should be goal of the week because I think we need to enjoy penalties more. We fear them. They give us nerves, but in fact, they can be moments of beauty.
That was beautiful.
There we go. Well,
Hey.
as we attempt to get this conversation back on actual serious matters of football, Josh, you had a point.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I don't think this clean sheet means anything. It doesn't mean diddly squat for this Victory team because Western Sydney Wanderers this season have scored 2 goals total. Wellington Phoenix have scored more goals than Western Sydney this year. They can't score, so to keep a clean sheet against them is the minimum. I mean, they've got a pretty good defense, in fairness. So this was always the most likely scoreline for this game.
Yes,
but
and-
I don't think Victory played particularly well, and I don't think a defensive performance like that gives you any confidence going into the crunch matches against Melbourne City and Sydney that they'll need to go through to actually win the title, like the expectation was in pre-season with the squad they assembled. So Victory have still got their problems.
Before Teo jumps in, Josh, give a shout out to your girl as well. What are your thoughts on her performance?
Oh, she nearly scored the actual goal of the season, not a penalty. So that was a good hit from Chidiac.
Very quickly, because you're right, Wanderers weren't overly creative in this game, but we come on, whenever we speak on either Matildas or A-League Women's, we're always looking for defenders, we're always looking for centre-backs, and I have dropped Claire Hunt's name a couple of times, a really outstanding performance today, and again, she was never going to be ready for this Asian Cup because she's coming back from 2 ACLs, but 2023, I think she's now right there. If you're going to watch, if you need a reason to watch Goal Shy Wanderers, watch it to look at their defenders and to look at Claire Hunt into the future.
Sorry, I've just seen the cricket.
And with that,
What happened? Someone give me a score up there.
Oh, no.
Australia just run through England.
Oh,
Listening in the pod.
no.
It's 9:57 p.m. and Australia.
And Joey's heart just broke into.
Oh, wait, you lost again? No, impossible.
Yeah, they lost again.
This is
Didn't it only start 2 seconds ago.
Yeah.
this is the fan equivalent of Joe Root getting hit in the nuts again. Joey's just feeling the pain right now.
Yeah, they were 1 for 82 and got bowled out for 124. Anyway, this is the national cricket curriculum. We're hardly challenging the great cricketer here, guys.
Joey's out of
Right.
action. Let's move on.
Yeah,
All
let's
right,
move
I'm
on.
going to move us on. All right, this is how it should have been. Do we have any more A-League women's games that we need to talk about?
just
Oh yeah.
the other finalist potential champ, Melbourne City. Jesus Christ, England. All right. Melbourne City went into Adelaide. Adelaide served up Melbourne City a taste of their own medicine throughout the first half. I thought Adelaide United very unlucky not to take a 1-0 lead into the dressing room of that game. They certainly would have been good value for the lead. Not sure whether it was the heat, whether it was fitness. I don't know what it was, but could not sustain that in the second half. City eventually coming in over the top. Rebecca Stott and Policina combining for an excellent goal. Policina finishing off Stott's pass. Rebecca Stott, another 90-minute performance from her on a comeback. Another potential player of the game performance in the midfield. I would have thought in a game where Hannah Wilkinson was kept unusually quiet by the Adelaide defence. The Reds did a good job of denying her avenues to get in behind, whether that was by just swarming her when the ball made its way upfield, or particularly in the first half, simply preventing City from getting to the ball into positions where they could let loose with those long passes. So they did that very well. But in the end, potentially the halftime adjustments from Rado Vidicic, who we have already sung the praises of this season on this podcast, gets the job done. And I saw nothing this weekend to dissuade me from thinking that if the unlikely is going to happen and a team is going to stop Sydney this season, it will be Melbourne City.
Just a question on this game, probably best for Teo and Joey on this, but based off how Adelaide played in the first half, very impressive. They probably should have had something from this, at least gotten something from this game. Is this finally the team that's going to break that finals drought? Like, are they going to sneak into fourth? Because they have been pretty good this year.
It could be a philosophical discussion of how fair is this competition with who plays Sydney and City twice and who plays Canberra and Wellington twice. And it's been the bugbear of every fan of this league from day one that it's not a full home and away. This might actually finally be the straw that breaks the camel's back, because Adelaide have played City twice. I think they played Victory twice. And I believe they only play Wellington once. However, they did get to play Canberra twice. They played Wellington twice? Okay, yeah, well, twice, well, so maybe Newcastle are the ones that get to feel aggrieved, or Perth. So I think that it's going to come down to potentially goal difference to decide 4th, 5th, 6th. That could be the difference maker. Yeah, the unequal fixture.
Yeah, if the fixture was all things equal, I would say it is probably, in my estimation, down to Adelaide and Perth Glory for that final slot in the finals. One could say that Perth, having to live on the road for so long and having had COVID go through their team, you could give Adelaide the edge on that. On the other hand, Adelaide being Adelaide and continuing to do Adelaide things throughout their history in the A-League Women's, one might give the advantage to Perth Glory on that. But as Teo said, it might come down to quirks of the scheduling, which, once again, is just fucking annoying when it comes to this competition, which we are ostensibly trying to position as one of the top 5 in the world. And I understand it's hard, but we still don't even have a full home and away season when we are hosting a Women's World Cup in 2023, and we are somehow trying to figure out how we are going to develop the next generation of players from what is the current golden generation, targeting doing something at the Women's World Cup next year, regardless of what they actually end up doing, as we have also discussed on this podcast. But I guess anybody else on this game or points on the other games? We saw Newcastle coming. Yes.
Really quick thing on the Newcastle game, because we've seen some outlandish crowd estimates on Twitter over the last few hours. I have actually got the official crowd number of the Newcastle versus Perth Glory game that has come through. It is actually triple the initial estimate that a certain someone had on Twitter. We had, almost triple. 713 people were actually at the number 2 sports ground in Newcastle today. So a lot better than a certain someone counted with his finger and decided to go with 208.
Oh, I mean, on that point, I should just point out the tweet from a friend of the podcast, Samantha Lewis, tweeting out and giving some props to the fans, tweeting out also big props to the fans in Newcastle tonight, and more proof why smaller grounds are great for the dub. Close to the action, loud, involved, created some great atmosphere that ebbed and flowed with the on-pitch drama. A perfect stadium for this league. So, yeah, it seems like it was an excellent atmosphere at the number 2 sports ground.
It would be remiss of me not to mention that Wellington were 2-0 up today against Brisbane. And Brisbane didn't have to play well to come back and win. I don't think they would have left relieved to bank the 3 points, but they wouldn't have been happy with their performance, nor with the way they conceded the 2 goals, especially the one from a corner. And it was just delightful to see Alyssa Wynnham's goal celebration. That's going to go not so much around the world, but definitely around New Zealand. And given they're hosting the World Cup, I mean, you speak of bolters, Phil Rollo, friend of the pod, he wants Alyssa Wynnham in Jitka Klimkova's next national team. And you know what? Given that Jitka Klimkova doesn't know about Indy Riley being a dual national, pick full-blooded New Zealanders. Leave the half Australians to us. So take Alyssa Wynnham, leave Indy Riley. I'm happy. It's a win-win.
I just wanted to point out that when we chatted to Jessica Nash on Radio Dub, we always ask a question to our guest, which like unheralded player in dub should you look out for? It's a question that Pakua always likes to ask on the show. And Jessica Nash said Hannah Lowry, and she went and scored in this game. So good shout, Jessica Nash.
There you go. And I'll just say on the Brisbane versus Wellington Phoenix game, Taylor, you point out that Brisbane didn't have to play that well to come back, although I would say it might be a bit easier to come back into a game when you have the best midfielder in the competition pulling the strings for you in that midfield. But all right, moving on from the dub, we have other matters to speak to. A few Aussies making moves abroad, and the most noticeable, Riley McGree, not a boy. Instead, he is going to Borough. This a move that caused much wailing and gnashing of the teeth across the Australian football commentariat. No doubt keen to see Ange Postecoglou sign an Australian for his squad. And the rest of you can correct me if I'm wrong, but given that Milos Degenek was already at Yokohama when Ange arrived, I believe this would have been the first time Ange actually signed an Australian to one of his squads since he left the national team post. So that would have been interesting, but it didn't come off in the end. Riley McGree is now in the championship. A good move, a bad move. Who wants to take first crack at that?
I think it's a great move. Putting it bluntly, he's going to a team that have Premier League aspirations. I know this whole thing about, well, they're not there yet, but they are on the periphery of playing in the playoffs. They are the form team in the championship right now. They've got a great manager in Chris Wilder, who is a very innovative manager. We saw his time at Sheffield United pre-last season. He did some really good things there. I think they finished 10th or something from memory from that season, but he'll probably slot right into the starting lineup. I think that's one thing we've got to remember. If there's an opportunity to play football, and it's in the championship, which is not, for an Aussie going abroad, it's actually not a terrible level for him to keep getting minutes. He's used to the championship, having played at Birmingham. I think that this is a great move for him. Going to Celtic, he could have potentially been down the pecking order, which I think he would have been. And should everything go to plan, should Middlesbrough go on a bit of a run now and, potentially get promoted, which, they're sixth right now. They've won their last 4 games. They're right in the mix. That would be great for him in the Premier League. Another Aussie in the Premier League. We haven't had an Aussie in the Premier League now for, I think, since Matt Ryan left. So this is actually it'd be a good step for him.
Nick, you make some compelling points, but you're pretending as if this decision wasn't solely down to cold, hard cash, which all power to him, but it just sounded like Borough offered way more money than Celtic did. And, if he plays and does well, it's going to be seen as a good move. If he doesn't get many minutes for Borough, it's going to be, you cashed in, you could have played for Ange. We're going to just judge this in retrospect. But it seems like it came down to the financials. They had their transfer fee agreed and it broke down over personal terms. They seemed to be open to the idea of playing for Celtic, but they just couldn't compete financially, which is a reality for Scottish clubs now. The championship is beating them to signings all the time.
Well, the interesting thing is Charlotte, the club that owned his contract, made a $3.4 million US profit on Riley McGree without McGree ever setting foot in the United States, which leads me to believe, do they even play football or are they just trading NFTs? And Riley McGree is a non-fungible token that has been sold from effectively Birmingham to Middlesbrough via Charlotte. I mean, I think he's made the right decision. If Celtic were in the Champions League knockout rounds and McGree was guaranteed to be in the first team, maybe it's a discussion. But they're only a point out of, I haven't seen overnight results, so it might be different now. But at the time he signed, they were only a point out of 6th. I mean, of course you go to the team that's pushing for the Premier League. It's a no-brainer.
I disagree.
So we don't build shit. We don't create shit. It's a Fugazi. It's a Wazoo.
If anyone's seen the South Park post-COVID special with Butters and NFTs, I'm not going to spoil it for you, but I think it sums up how I effectively feel about them. I couldn't know or be interested less.
I would think if all things are equal and playing time is equal, and the most important decision that he had to make was on playing time and how much he was actually going to. So if that was equal, I would have gone to Celtic, because I think that although that they are 1 point off sixth, 6 teams don't go up to the championship. 2 teams go up automatically, and then 1 goes up via the playoff. I don't think it's necessarily going to be Middlesbrough. Whereas with Celtic, you're guaranteed European football next season, whether that's in the Europa League or in the Champions League. I think there's a good chance that you are going to go and win the league with Celtic next year. We've seen many players make the jump from Celtic to the Premier League. You're talking of Kieran Tierney, you're talking of Virgil van Dijk, you're talking of Victor Wanyama, you're talking of Usman Edouard more recently. So I think that jump, if his ultimate goal is to play in the Premier League, which I'm pretty sure it is, or in the top 5 leagues, I think the jump from Celtic to the Premier League can be done. In fact, I think it's easier to do than the jump from Middlesbrough to the Premier League. Even if they come up with him, there is no guarantee that they will hold on to him. They might sell him. And then I think the added thing of working with Ange, when you have to go many times to probably Qatar, but let's say Australia to play international football, not a lot of coaches are necessarily sympathetic to that. Also, the injuries that you're going to pick up. Also, the trusting of the medical staff of the national team. Middlesbrough might look at that and go, man, what are you doing? No, we're not going to release you for this thing. No, the relationship between Middlesbrough and Australia is going to be a lot worse than it would have been between Ange and Australia. So I think that all things being equal, I would have gone to Celtic.
Do we know that Ange is going to give him more leeway than
Ange will understand it, and Ange will at least trust people like Andrew Clark.
Ange has a job to do. Ange has got to win the league with Celtic and play European football. I don't think he's going to particularly. I don't think he's the type to deliberately tie a hand behind his back just because it's Australia. I think he'd treat Riley McGree the same as he'd treat any of his other players.
He's also got Japanese players in the team who are going to be making the same trip. So, potentially Celtic could organise some charter flights.
I think he definitely will manage it a lot better than someone who's not familiar with that trip, who's not familiar with what it takes to be out there, who's not familiar with the setup.
Yeah, but I'll give you the Japanese point is an obvious. It's a logistical thing, and that makes sense. But honestly, I'm not sure the sentimental Ange would have given McGree special treatment because he's Australian.
It's not about sentiment or special treatment. It's a thing about understanding what is required when a player travels, how that can be managed, how a team. Ange understands how players can come all the way from Europe to Australia and then go back and it work okay. Chris Wilder has no experience doing this. Even with the Sheffield United team, there was no great.
Yeah, they were all
players.
UK.
Yeah, it was Brexit FC. Yeah.
But you can learn that. Like you can. Yeah, you can understand that.
He's not going to learn that. He's not going to learn. I just think that all things being equal, I would have gone and played under Ange. I think that would have been better for his career. And if it is about securing more money, the thing is you shouldn't be thinking about that at 23 because the big contract is coming at 26, 27, 28. And it's more important where you are there because if he stuffs up Middlesbrough and then just comes back to Australia by the time 26, he's not getting any big money.
I would argue it's far easier to move to the Premier League in the English league system than it is coming from Scotland. And I would also say that Riley McGree's price markup on this move alone, even before he kicks a ball, is going to have him on Brentford and Southampton's radar as a potential investment for an even bigger markup in the future.
Hold on. Why wouldn't he be at Southampton's radar if he's at Celtic? Southampton have bought from Celtic Virgil van Dijk, Victor Wanyama. I don't know who else.
Joey. When they go to sort the spreadsheet by percentage of transfer increase, transfer to transfer, they're going to see Riley McGree up near the top purely because of the markup on this deal he's just done. And I think Southampton with their new owners and Brentford with their analytics system that studies the market looking for inequalities, they're going to see this guy and they go, well, shit, his markup was X 100% on his previous transfer. Does that mean his next leap, instead of being 5 million, is going to be 50? And that's going to, regardless of how he plays, they're going to be scouting him and watching him, and it's just going to be easier for them in the English league system to see him. That's my opinion on it anyway.
And I think the English league, I know you can cite a whole bunch of players that have moved from Celtic to the English system, Nick, but there is a perception in the English. I mean, listen, I'm not going to pretend there aren't inherent feelings of superiority in English football. especially compared to Scottish football.
If only you could say the same about cricket.
Here's what I would say about this: is that Celtic.
No, I'm going to finish the point until.
All right, well, finish your point because you take these giant pauses which don't work in an audio medium.
Why did Josh have to just drive a dagger into my soul again? I've lost my train. No, there are perceptions in English football that it's if basically playing at Celtic and Rangers in Scotland is like playing on easy mode, whereas playing week in and week out in the Championship, there are perceptions in English football that the Championship is a better league than the Scottish League, in terms of maybe not in top quality in terms of the Rangers and Celtic, but in terms of overall depth, week in and week out challenges. The feeling in English football is that the Championship is a better league, and if McGree is doing it week in and week out for Borough, I don't think it's unfair to say that his stock would be better in English teams' minds than if he was, rotated, doing well when he was rotated in and out of the squad with Celtic, but because of that perception that you're basically a flat track bully if you're playing for Celtic or Rangers in Scottish football.
Look, I think that if you prove yourself at Celtic, that's one thing, and I think I'm not saying he necessarily would. I don't know. I think that's very hard to predict. But if he did, and then they play Europa League or Champions League or Conference League, then that negates that thing about, it's Celtic are flat track bullies. If he's doing it against Real Betis and Bayer Leverkusen and those type of teams, that to me is a much bigger indicator than he's doing it against Millwall and Burton Albion and whoever else is in that competition.
That's a big point to you, Nick, somebody that enjoys and appreciates European football. Now put yourselves in the shoes of a middle-aged white English scout.
I don't think they exist anymore. I think it is all spreadsheets and data and Moneyball. In Premier League clubs, I don't think anyone, maybe Manchester United, is the only people who are trusting the old guard to sign players. I think it is all about, I think pretty much this whole thing of where you do it in what league, I think they're across everyone. All of them are coming across their radar. It's just basically how they decipher that.
I think the whole thing's like that scene in Moneyball. Nice face, ugly girlfriend means no confidence. It's still like that. It's a reference. It's a reference.
I know. It's a great movie.
Sometimes
it is a great movie, yes.
Debano, you wanted to jump in?
Yeah.
I just want to make a really quick point. I know he hasn't left the Championship yet, but I know they're very different players and everything else, and it is talking about sort of getting when you play well in the Championship and the interest that you garner because you are playing in England. At the end of the day, the Championship has quite a large audience as well. We've got to remember that it is arguably, I think they still brand themselves as one of the most expensive leagues in the world because they played the most expensive game in world football with the playoff and everything. But Ben Brereton Diaz has a massive price tag on him for having an amazing 6 months at Blackburn. Right. And I don't think too many people would have known Ben Brereton Diaz before, his rise at Chile. I know that sort of helps out as well, but he's forming the Championship. But now there's like a $25 million price tag slapped on his head. So what happens now if, say, Riley McGree plays really well for Middlesbrough, say puts together a really, really good 6 months for a team pushing for promotion. He plays in playoff games. We're talking about big audience. Playoff games in the Championship garner massive audiences around the world because we said it's a very expensive game. People want to see who's going to get promoted. He might still get the attention of the aforementioned Brentford or the aforementioned Southampton who look at those metrics and go, we can make a bit of a buck off this guy. Let's just go buy him. Let's give him a crack. Or if Middlesbrough get promoted and even if he plays a good 6 months there, it might actually work out for him because there's also that same thing about Celtic, Celtic could be a great move to springboard your career. Now, I know that they've had different careers and different sort of circumstances with injuries, but Tom Rogic never made the move after Celtic. And everyone probably thought after when he went to Celtic, eventually we're going to see him playing in the Premier League or see him playing in Serie A. There were links to Arsenal and Fiorentina at some points as well. And it never happened. I know, as I said, I know there were injuries. I know it was different circumstances. But he's now at the point in his career where it's like, is Celtic now his ceiling? Is he ever going to make a move to the bigger club? Or is he now going to start on the slow slide backs? We've seen him being linked to Middle Eastern teams. I'm just spitballing here. I know that everyone's different, but that's sort of how I say it. I think that Middlesbrough move could turn to gold for him.
My point
Josh,
is,
you have,
if he,
oh, hold on, I think Josh got in the chat first, Nick. Josh,
All right,
what were
go.
you?
No, Stoll, you go first. You go first.
all right, my point is, if he puts a run of 6 months, a good run of 6 months together at either club, he's going to be fine. The important thing is that he plays, and if he plays well, either he's going to be fine. I guess my point would be to the Tom Rogic example is the Mas Luongo example. And I actually think Mas Luongo is more talented than Riley McGree at the same age. And Mas Luongo went to the championship, QPR, and it was all balls over his head. And he turned from a really good, in my opinion, really good ball playing midfielder into just an absolute battler. And he just battles away. And his career, both at national and club level, has just dissipated into, I think he was a huge prospect for us 10 years ago, and it really hasn't worked out for him. And so these moves, I think, can go either way, which is why I would have gone with the more trusted idea of Ange.
Well, I mean,
I think McGree is his skill set is more suited to the championship than Luongo's ever was, regardless of the talent difference between the two players, because McGree's skill set is getting into the box again and again and again and being a goal threat and being super direct. And that suits the championship to a T. I think he also would have been good at Celtic because they have a striker in Kyogo who vacates that space. He's a player who drops deep as a false nine, and then it automatically opens up the channel for a player to hit the box every time. So I would have been more interested, I guess, in seeing McGree at Celtic and how Ange would have used him, just because I'm just curious about that. But McGree's stint at Birmingham shows that, you know, he can stand out at championship level, even with bit part minutes. So I wouldn't be too concerned about the style of football for him because he's a little bit more of a bang crash wallop, you know, blood and thunder type player.
Celtic should sign Mas Luongo. That's what I think is to come out of this.
Well, I mean, maybe Celtic could sign Daniel Hazani. That would no, but Nick Devano, you were keeping your eye on another Aussie. Yeah, we'll still call him an Australian playing in Europe. Apparently, is going to dominate Serie A again tomorrow. Nick, do you want to fill us in? Or
Yeah, if dominating is
come
potentially
in off the long run up.
Yeah, if dominating is potentially coming on as a 30-second victory cigar against one of the bottom teams in Serie A against Cagliari, then yeah, sure. Look, I saw the news Christian Volpato is going to be in the squad again tomorrow, and every single time he's in the squad, soccer Twitter seems to be on the brink of a meltdown. It's like the red sirens are going off like, oh my God, is this the moment we're going to get more Christian Volpato from the 1-minute cameo in a 3-0 loss against Inter? Again, to hammer home the point, I know that at Roma at the moment, they're a bit of a basket case and there's a bit of a revolving door with youth players coming in and out of the bench and everything like that. But we just need, if I see him come on tomorrow and he plays, say, 5 minutes, I don't want to wake up or see after that another article about saying, freaking cap him. No. Let the kid freaking play a game of football. Let him actually play. Roma's his best opportunity to play. If you want to see him play, his best opportunity is actually going to be on Friday because they're playing Lecce in the Coppa Italia, who I believe are now they're City B. That's going to be his opportunity to play. If you're going to get excited, wait till Friday, please. Everyone just pump the brakes. We've got 5 more days till we get there. Let's just wait until then. He might not even play, but that's going to be his best opportunity because Socceroos squad's going to be named soon. Like, it probably will be named by the time our next podcast rolls around because, you know, the week after that's a Vietnam game. Please don't start saying then, oh, we should have capped him. We should have picked him because he played 5 minutes this morning against Cagliari. Just leave it, for God's sake. Just let the kid play. Italy are not going to pick him up, even with Chiesa doing his ACL. There's like another 10 options before him. That's no disrespect to Christian Volpato. That's just facts about a thing called a depth chart and a thing about players who are playing week in and week out, not just in Serie A, but other Italians playing throughout Europe. And there are some that are playing. There's not many of them, but that would be ahead of him that are playing in other leagues. So please park it. Just let the kid play at least 5 or 10 games, and then we'll start making assumptions.
I'm just going to, one quick thing before we move on, and even before I get to that, I'd like to gleefully announce that Soccer Twitter's main character tonight appears to maybe perhaps want to post through it. So that's going to be something to keep track of throughout the rest of the evening. But on the subject of Wunderkinder, that apparently we must cap before they've played a single senior minute. I did note recently that Alex Robertson has been recalled to Manchester City after his loan stint in the Scottish League with Ross County, which amounted to a grand total in league play of, let me just do the maths here, I think 73
This is
minutes.
not going to be good.
Yeah, 73 minutes across, what was it, 20 rounds that he was available for, according to Transfer Market. That included, let's see the maths here, that included, in the squad for 13 games, in the starting 11 for 0 games, substituted in 3 games, on the bench and not used for 10 games. So, and not in the squad for a number of others. So, yeah, cautionary tale that just because somebody's a hot youth prospect before they play a game of senior football doesn't mean they need a cap. Yeah.
So Joey, you're saying that my campaign for Belinda Stajewski to go straight into the Matildas from the NPL is a little short-sighted?
I'm afraid. I'm afraid so.
I'm
Fair
glad
enough.
you brought up the Alex Robertson comparison, Joe, because this Volpato situation is Alex Robertson Mark II. And the only reason their stories get all this media play is because it's either an agent or a parent or a former coach who wants to tee off on the state of the A-League or the state of Australian football and get some mileage out of that. It's someone with an axe to grind wants to make a big deal out of it, and therefore you get all these articles about it and all this furore online. You know, Volpato is clearly not ready to be selected for the Socceroos. Neither is Alex Robertson. The idea of trying to cap someone for the sake of it is just give me a break.
But it's also, we've spoken about player NRI. Is this not club NRI?
It's agent NRI, Teo.
Yeah, it's agent NRI as
because there's
well.
Michael Owen and Francesco Totti are the 2 agents involved.
Yeah, I think the other thing we've got to remember is just, sorry, Nick, I'll just quickly finish this one, but this is the last thing I want to say. I saw some comparisons to Lyndon Dykes and even to Chris Economides from 7 years ago about, you know, Chris Economides hadn't played at Lazio, and then Ange decided to pick him for a meaningless friendly against Germany or in North Macedonia, when at the time, very different rules, very different context. The Socceroos right now, as we said it weeks ago when this first started, the Socceroos right now are not in the position right now to bring a player on for 3 or 4 straight victory cigar games in all important World Cup qualifiers over this year. The Chris Economides situation, even then, that was the first international window after Australia won the Asian Cup. It was a lot of international friendlies that was sort of like, okay, what have we got after this squad? Who else is there that's in the pipeline? You had the window to just get it done because you could. This is so different. It's apples and oranges. Lyndon Dykes, different situation, but also on top of it, if Christian Volpato doesn't want to play for Australia, like what can we do about it? Like seriously, putting up, like, what the hell can we do about it? If he decides, look, I want to go and I want to try my luck and play for Italy, so what? Like that's the end of the day. Like, you know, we can't be so worried about our patch.
Let's not forget, this happens with the West Indian diaspora in England all the time. Players want to play for England into their late 20s, into their early 30s, even into their mid-30s. And then maybe they answer the call from Montserrat or Antigua or Aruba. Now, I'm not putting Australia in the same boat yet, but people are...
Aruba, Antigua.
No, don't do that. We'll get a DMCA strike. Don't sing the Beach Boys. But we're not in that category yet. But let's not forget, if we miss the World Cup, we're going to be a desirable pre-World Cup friendly opponent for X, Y, and Z number of nations. We'll have a gazillion useless friendlies to be able to throw away caps on. So let's qualify for the World Cup with our strongest possible team while we can still make it.
Yeah, thanks. I'm just going to add on to what Nick said. If they want to play for another country, more power to them. Same thing with Denny Juric. If he wants to play for Croatia, more power to the lad. It's obviously his decision. We saw during the week that apparently we're about to lose 50 million players to various... We're about to lose 50 million players to African nations. Good luck to them. If they want to play for African nations, that's fantastic. I really hope they succeed. And in following their dreams, that's great. I mean, but I don't think that should change their career trajectories here. If they want to do something, good on them. I hope they're sure of it, and no doubt they are.
Yeah, and also I'd just quickly say, if you look at the Socceroos, when was the last time an 18-year-old broke into the team and actually was valuable to the team? And what I was going to say, Daniel Arzani? Arzani, yeah. Arzani, right. And Arzani was an unbelievable talent in that season at Melbourne City. And also, I would say our most important players often now who are in the Socceroos, who've actually had good Socceroos careers, unlike Arzani, players like Hrustic, it takes them years. It takes them years of developing in Europe. Hrustic was playing for what? About 2 seasons in the Eredivisie every week before he was actually like a part of the first 11 of the Socceroos. It took basically a move to the Bundesliga for it to be like, maybe that's the opposite of NRI. But I just think that, someone's playing for 1 second at Roma or 5 minutes training with Man City. It does not correlate. These things take time.
But also remember as well, Arzani had eyeballs on him and he was playing against seasoned players. Like, I know it was the A-League, but still he was playing minutes, senior football minutes, and it added up. People saw that this kid can play. No, there's not many people watching the Primavera every single week. I know maybe some of the scouts are, but the regular pundit is not tuning into a game at the Milanello between Milan and Roma. Like, they're not going to be going out of their way to do that. So let's just give him time. Let's let him make his decision. It was the same thing as you mentioned as well with Daniel Arzani and Iran. Exactly the same thing. I know it was, around the time of a World Cup, but still, if he, as I want to say, this is not being disrespectful to them and not trying to be sarcastic. You want to go play for Italy, you want to go play for Iran, you want to go play for England, whoever it is, good. Go. Do it. Back yourself in. I like the ambition. If it doesn't work out, Australia's always there as the backup if you don't get capped. And if it does work out to you, great, you're playing for Italy.
We have 15 years of evidence that FIFA continuously relaxes its rules on being cap-tied. And I think we're only 5 years away from people doing what Di Stefano did and just playing for 3 different national teams. I mean, I can't guarantee you that Leo Messi won't play for Qatar at the 2022 World Cup, the way things are going. So, even if...
It would suck to have to support Qatar.
We are... well, you won't be the only Australian. We're applying a late 90s mentality of being cap-tied. Stoll didn't get the in-joke at all there. We're applying a late 90s mentality of being cap-tied to a modern situation, which is only going to get more relaxed from here. So, and I think it's because of the Tim Cahill experience of him being cap-tied to Samoa until FIFA changed the rules. But that was in the early 2000s. So we've come a long way since then.
It's a fun story as well. Here's a player that you don't really know, and maybe he might be a legend for the Socceroos, but maybe we might lose him. Okay, I'm going to click on that story.
It's also worth remembering that if FIFA didn't change the rules exactly when they did, Tim Cahill would have gone to the 2002 World Cup with Ireland, and we would have lost him to the Republic of Ireland. So, the rules tend to change at fortuitous times for us.
So basically, he was Mary Fowler 0.50. Is what you're saying on that front.
Well, I think, but also, we look at Christian Vieri being born in Australia. We look at, the 2 Croatians, Josip Simic and Ante Seric. And I think that still guides a lot of our thinking, even though these things are now more than 20 years ago.
Yeah. Vieri burns us. That's it's just.
But remember as well,
we got Max. We got Max.
Does Volpato have a much less talented brother that we could call up?
Well, we don't know because we haven't seen Volpato play, so we don't know how talented.
But the thing is, as well,
Volpato could be the less talented brother. We don't know.
You got to remember as well, Christian Vieri was one of the best strikers in the world in the 90s, and when Italy's coming and calling for a guy that was demanding the attention that he wasn't scoring like he was in Italy, you're going to play for Italy, right? Like, Australia at that time weren't even making the World Cup, and they were playing in Oceania. Do I want to play against the Solomon Islands every week and probably break Archie Thompson's record during that period, which he probably would have? Or do I want to go and play against, go to the Euro final in 2000 or go to the World Cup in France and in Japan and Korea?
To be fair, the modern day Christian Vieri just moved to Newcastle for £25 million. So, No bites. That's me blatantly trolling. I don't believe that for an instant.
All right, we've been going on for quite a long time now, so I'm going to move them on. And just reiterate what Nick says. If you want to play for Italy, good luck. Doesn't matter. You won't be playing at the World Cup, but good luck to you anyway. Okay, so moving on. One final thing, because we have already gone past the full 90, much to Nick Stoll's disgust, no doubt. But we have the wrap up from the Josh Cavallo incident, which we discussed on the podcast last week in its immediate aftermath of Cavallo's post on Instagram. Since that time, we of course had the statements from the clubs. Football Australia has also since come out and indicated that they can't come flat out and say they will do it yet on a procedural basis, I understand, but they have indicated a willingness to extend any bans to individuals found to have committed acts of hatred against Cavallo either at the games or on social media, extend their bans from the A-Leagues to nationwide bans. So that would mean they are banned from the A-Leagues, banned from national team games, banned from the FFA Cup, banned from NPL games. We all know that's a lot easier said than done when it comes to enforcement of bans from NPL games, but in theory, that would be the case. Football Australia has also since issued Melbourne Victory with a show cause notice surrounding this. Again, Victory has indicated a willingness to ban these individuals, so I'm sure that that is more procedural than anything else on Football Australia's part. But what we have not seen yet is we have not seen any further developments from Melbourne Victory. They put out one unattributed statement in the wake of the Cavallo incident, but unfortunately, with their game being cancelled this week, there were no media opportunities to get statements either from Victory players or Coach Tony Popovich. And I know, Josh, this is one thing that has stuck in your craw since the incident. I even saw you posting on Facebook on their post about the trip to Western Sydney Wanderers about it, that there still has been no statement of condemnation from Original Style Melbourne, which is disappointing you.
Yeah, I went for a bit of a keyboard warrior social justice there and tried to stir the pot a bit. Like, come on. Like, it's just pathetic that you can't come out and say, this isn't acceptable on the terrace. That doesn't take responsibility for saying it, because, I mean, there's a lot of fans are saying, well, we didn't direct the chant. No one's said it into a megaphone for everybody to repeat. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't condemn it when it happens, when you know it's happened. You know, you just have to come out and say, you know, don't do this shit on the terrace. Don't say this shit. Otherwise, you know, we'll kick you out. Like, it's so stupid that they can't make a simple statement. It's really annoyed me. And I do like a lot of the stuff that Original Style Melbourne have done in bringing back the atmosphere to Victory games, and they're a massive asset to the A-League. But when it comes to things like this, some of the attitudes are just completely backwards, and it disappoints me.
Yeah, I think I would say, like, supposedly Original Style Melbourne is supposed to, you know, it's supposed to be for Melbourne Victory fans, and Melbourne Victory's entire founding principles supposedly were about being a club for everybody in Melbourne, a club that would unite Melbourne. Now, in honour of our absent colleague, I will say that that foundation of inclusion was in that club of inclusion was in fact built on a foundation of exclusion when you actually dive down into the nitty-gritty of it. But still, that was supposedly the founding principle of Melbourne Victory. We're for everyone. And if you are purportedly for the fans of Victory who want to be for everyone, why would you not come out and say, you know, this isn't on? We want to represent Melbourne, whether you are gay, straight, black, white, whatever creed you follow, whatever, you know, politics you follow. If you're for Melbourne, we're for you. Like, you can just say that. That's not that hard. And I mean, like, I've seen some stuff around, I don't want to make political statements. Well, saying that homophobia is bad isn't a political statement. Saying that hating people because they are gay is bad is not a political statement. You know, would one say that hating people because they are black is a political statement? Saying that hating people because they are black is bad is a political statement? It doesn't make any sense. People aren't born and make the decision to be black. People aren't born and make the decision to be gay. It's not a political statement. Being pro-human rights isn't politics. In fact, the political statement is not making a statement in that situation, because you are nailing your flag to the mast in a not altogether becoming manner. And I mean, I think to be honest, I saw a great tweet in the immediate aftermath of the incident from Paul Mavroudis on this, and I'm just going to look it up now and sort of try to find it between his history posts and his stuff surrounding the Djokovic saga. Each active support generation seems to come to the point in their life cycle where their self-regard as the conscience or moral compass of the club comes into conflict with actually having to wrangle several hundred randoms into actually having a conscience. I think that's potentially what we're seeing with Melbourne Victory. If they want to be the conscience of Melbourne Victory, you can't sit this one out.
And they, I think, as you pointed out on the timeline, Joey, they weren't shy about expressing some pretty clear opinions on sports washing the other week,
which is very political.
Yeah, exactly. You're not active fan groups and ultras are not apolitical bodies. You know, you can't do it. And it's just basic human decency. And to come out and say that, thinking that you're going to alienate some of your member base, if you're alienating them, maybe those are the people that you want to alienate. Those are not people that you actually want at games.
Can I just make a quick point? Oh, sorry, you go first, Nick. You go first.
Oh, no, I was just going to say very quickly, Josh, to your point, it's just like when you call out something in the street. Like if you hear someone like in your immediate vicinity say like it's a mate or someone says something that's not right and you say, hey, like that's not on. Like you're not making that political statement. You're just saying that's just a crap move. Like you don't need to be over the top about it. Like you don't need to be, it doesn't need to be some huge statement. As Joey said, it just needs to be simple and straight to the point. We don't stand by it. It's a crap move, blah, blah, blah. Obviously, you're not going to word it like that. But it shouldn't be this hard. And it's been now a week. And Victory, I believe, are next in action next. I'm not sure when. I don't even think the fixtures come out for next weekend. But I'd be curious to see when they play, say, the Big Blue, which is coming up in a week and a bit time. Are they going to do some sort of statement in the terrace? They're going to do, like, they've got to do something. Like, come on. It's getting a bit ridiculous.
They're not going to say anything because they had a post since the Adelaide game about the fans going to go support Victory away in Western Sydney, and that game didn't end up happening. So they've just decided not to, and it really rankles. Anyway,
I want to just very quickly, the formalisation of the show cause notice. This is going to be troublesome for one reason. I'm going to use a precedent from my professional experience. When Victory's fans attacked South Melbourne fans at Lakeside, there was one particularly aggravating person who got dubbed the bleach thrower due to a photo of him who, having raided a cleaner's trolley, throwing a bottle or container of bleach into the stand, into the fans willy-nilly, may it hit whoever it hits. Melbourne Victory, Football Victoria and Victoria Police couldn't find the name of this person. Their combined resources, and some of these people, it was their full-time job to investigate, they couldn't find the name of the guy to charge him. So this formalization of the process, it's going to shine a magnifying glass on who's buying tickets, who's checking in, the COVID protocols of going to an A-League game. I think it's going to scratch a few surfaces that no one wants scratched because of the logistical headaches it's going to cause, and perhaps just doing the right thing and dealing with this from the beginning might stop a slippery slope. I hope it doesn't come to this, but I'm just using that precedent as an example of if you are trying to track down an otherwise anonymous person in a crowd, even in this day and age of QR codes and checking in, it's bloody difficult. And I don't envy the people who have these jobs to formally address this issue.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying that we should like bring back Hatamoto and plaster people's pictures on the front of the Herald Sun or anything. Like that's not what I'm asking for here. I'm just asking for a little bit of accountability. You know?
Yeah, if
Although football
people
could
that
use the coverage, you know.
No, let's not
Not
even
getting one at the
have that,
moment.
Nick. Let's just have those that ostensibly position themselves as leaders of something, be it a soul, a culture, whatever it be, actually stand up and be counted as leaders when it is not convenient, or it doesn't, or it's hard. That's when you actually get to serve as a leader. But okay, short of this, we are going very long, so I'm going to move us on super quickly. Very quickly, we don't know the fixture yet. I'm just going to go through what is on Google for the next load of fixtures before we next have a podcast.
Oh well,
and
we've got Paul the Octopus here. He can tell us which games are going ahead and which one's being postponed.
Okay, here we go. So I'm looking at this right now. Google has happening on Wednesday the 19th, Brisbane at home to Perth Glory. Going around the order of the screen, Nick Stoll, who wins that?
I mean, how do you even know what Perth Glory looks like? They haven't played for about 3 months.
Predictions,
I'm
Nick.
going to say 1-1.
Teo.
2-0 Brisbane.
Devano.
1-1 Sturridge plays. That's the bold prediction.
Josh Parrish.
I'm going to say Brisbane 2-1.
And I will say Brisbane 2-0. No Newcastle Western United listed on the Wednesday on Google, which is
Oh no.
weird.
There's been no announcement though.
All right, let's do it anyway. Newcastle versus Western United. Nick Stoll.
I say it every week and they never play. Newcastle 5, Western United zilch.
Taya.
Newcastle 5, Western United 3. Guess who's commentating?
Nick Devano.
Because I'll be writing a yarn, I don't want to have rewrites. I'm going to say Western United 2, Newcastle Jets 2, and I want it to be 2-2 in the first half. Done. Donezo.
Josh Parrish.
I was going to say 2-2 as well.
I'm going to say Western United 1, Newcastle Jets 0. Newcastle Jets will have 3.4 XG. Okay, moving on to the game on the Saturday. Central Coast hosting Melbourne Victory. Nick.
Central Coast 0, Melbourne Victory 1.
Taylor.
Postponed.
Josh.
Fair enough. I'm going to say that is a 1-1 draw.
Devano.
I'm going Victory 2-0.
Victory 1-0 for me. Perth Glory versus Newcastle Jets. You should know the order by now.
I mean, they're going to be tired they've played no games for about 4 years and then 2 games in 3 days. These guys are going to collapse. I'm going to say postponed due to fatigue. No.
Liverpool isn't playing, Nick. They can't do that.
I'm going to say Newcastle Jets 5, Perth Glory 1, Sturridge scores.
If Perth are playing 2 games in the space of 3 days, Newcastle 4-0.
3-1 Newcastle.
I think we're both forgetting that both these teams haven't played in a month. They're both going to be completely just gassed. It's going to be a dull 0-0, like just absolutely terrible game. Yeah, 0-0.
Perth Glory 2-0, Sturridge brace. Melbourne City versus Sydney FC.
1-1.
I'm going to say 1-1.
I'm going to say City win this 2-1.
Sydney 2-1. Bit of revenge.
City tend to have played Sydney pretty well as of late, so I'll say City 3, Sydney 1. Brisbane Roar versus Adelaide.
Brisbane Roar zilch. Adelaide United zilch.
2-0 Adelaide.
Yeah, I'm going to say Adelaide 1-0.
This has Brisbane Roar finally winning a game written all over it. 1-0.
Ooh.
Brisbane Roar 2, Adelaide United 0. Western United versus Wellington Phoenix in a rivalry game which has sort of lost a bit of sting ever since Rudan left Western United.
Western United 1, Wellington Phoenix 0.
Western United 1, Wellington Phoenix 0.
Western United 1, Wellington Phoenix 0. Come on.
Western United 1, Wellington Phoenix 1.
No. So close.
Western United 1, Wellington Phoenix 0. Debano, you ruined it. You ruined it.
There's always one smart ass, isn't there?
Okay.
Hey, we forgot there's actually an FFA.
No, you don't get to speak. You don't get to speak.
I'm just saying.
And then the
I'm just
final.
saying.
No. MacArthur versus Western Sydney Wanderers.
Oh, jeez.
MacArthur 2, Wanderers 1.
Postpone.
Yeah, I was going to say postponed as well. I'll give a prediction if it goes ahead. I think if Robertson is on the touchline, MacArthur win. But if he's still in ISO, then Western Sydney win.
I'm going to go postponed.
MacArthur 1, Western Sydney Wanderers 0. And with that said, the predictions are over. We've got Socceroos in action the week after. We've got Matildas in action throughout the week as well. We've got A-League Men's, A-League Women's. So make sure that you are joining us next week for what is potentially going to be our biggest episode of the national curriculum ever. And I'm not sure what that will look like, given that this one has gone 1 hour and 54 minutes. We might have to put out a 2-parter before we turn into the Lord of the Rings of football podcasts. But my name has been Joey Lynch. Thank you for joining us on another episode of the National Curriculum. I have been joined by Nick Stoll, Teo Pellizzeri,
Thanks.
Goodbye.
Nick Davano,
It's always awkward. Are you meant to respond to this or not?
Josh Parrish.
This is turning into the Irishman of football podcasts. I've been
Thank you for
digitally
joining us.
de-aged,
Make
by the
sure you
way.
subscribe.
Hang
and
on,
leave
no,
us
Josh, you've been digitally aged, but in which direction, Chris Kamara?
I'm trying to wrap it up and they keep going. Remember, 5-star
Irishman was a good
reviews,
movie.
5-star reviews, leaving the review who your preferred host is. But for now, goodbye all.